Tasby, for those of you who haven't come across us, we're a community group of interested people, and we're just trying to spread information and make people aware of what's coming down the line with all the numerous changes in the Tasmanian planning scheme and other legislative changes. We're a member organisation of the Planning Matters Alliance Tasmania, and so we work closely with Sophie and the gang. Now, I'm a practising planner at Clarence City Council, and it's my great pleasure to introduce Trent Henderson to you. He is an independent consultant at the moment with an interest in heritage and he set up his own company about, 18 months ago, called Red Seal Planning. I first met Trent when I, fresh out of the Masters of Planning course at UDA, started work at the Huron Valley Council. He was my senior planner at the time, so he inducted me into all things statutory planning, traps for the unwary. So my grounding in planning and the statutory side has certainly come from Trent. Now, there is maybe a little bit of overlap with the information that Brendan covered this morning, but what we're hoping to do is give you a little bit more of an understanding of the sort of statutory processes and issues that are coming down the line for heritage, built heritage in the future, and what you can do about it or not do about it when it's your turn to make a representation to the local provision schedule for your council, be it Hobart or another. So with that said, I'll hand over to Trent. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Indra, and apologies to everyone for misgivings. Now, a few caveats. There's always a caveat when you're dealing with town planners. I think the devil's going to be in the detail. Okay, now the planning system, I haven't actually done an application with the new planning system. So what I mean by that is we won't actually understand what the problems are, I don't think, until we've actually done a DA through the process. It's just a personal experience thing. When we did the interim planning schemes, everyone says yes, it'll be all fine and dandy. Then we found out this is a problem with this phrase or the implications of the way different provisions interrelate with each other. So, and I say that up front because there might be some questions which I just won't know about until we actually get to that level. And I also apologise for not being here this morning, but I left government to spend more time with my family, and my son's soccer game took priority this morning. Fortunately, the last game of the season we lost, so probably due to his coach, which was me. Okay, so I do apologise for going over any grounds. Overview: heritage is dealt with in two phrases, or probably three components in Tasmania. Land Use Planning Act and under the Cultural Heritage Act. So the third phrase is that neither of those two acts, I personally think, deal with in any form Aboriginal heritage. Okay, so I'm not referring to Aboriginal heritage at all. Let's put that aside for a little while. This sort of sets out, I'm trying to give you an idea how the layers it's actually come through. We've dealt with the Heritage Act, Land Use Planning, interim planning schemes, ministerial directives and the guidelines, and changes for local level has to be done in accordance with the guidelines. So when we're dealing with the council planners have been running around, they haven't been just willy-nilly. The guideline number 1 for LPS zones, codes and applications, and any ministerial directives on how to apply the new scheme is what they're sticking to. Now, they can deviate from that if they've done the strategic work behind it, but there's been heavily pushed not to have done that in addition, because it's meant to have been quick and easy. I'll leave it there. Current planning controls. This spaghetti diagram sort of indicates how the current planning controls is dealt with. Land use strategies are on the side. Zonings of the planning schemes are meant to have been in accordance with land use strategies. They have a major issue in themselves, is that they're not really updated. Technically they're quite a fair way out, and whether they adequately deal with heritage is a moot point as well. I've got the borough charter there. Indra didn't mention, I'm also an associate member of Indra Boss. I'm not an actual full member. But the borough charter is not a legal document, but it is regarded as the best practice for dealing with heritage, cultural heritage, in Australia, and is highly regarded around the world. But I want to emphasise, it's not a legal document, so if you write to council to say it's not in accordance with the borough charter, council can't do much about that. It's actually a way of reviewing things and actually reviewing whether processes are actually occurring properly for heritage. The issue is the question whether the Tasmanian heritage schemes have been written consistent with the borough charter, and does it actually give the heritage codes that robustness as well. Transition guidelines. I really don't expect you to read that, but I might lead you to it. But what I'm trying to get to is that with this and the next slide, I'm trying to emphasise here, there's a huge amount of information there that the local council planners have to stick to. They are only meant to be transitioning local heritage, which I'm sure Brendan actually pointed out this morning. And the mentality is, or the theory is, that if it's dealt with under a different act, then it's dealt with there. We let's not tie things up with planning. And so therefore, things that are dealt with under state listing, not double-handed by planning in the local government side of things. And therefore, why should a house or a site that's actually got state listing also have to go through the double bureaucracy of local councils? Okay? Maybe forgetting to actually understand that there's some local issues that might be missed as well. But that's the idea behind it. That also doesn't quite actually get around the issue that is not necessarily dealt with adequately either. So again, it's transitional guidelines. It's not meant to be, is this new listings, is this an removal of listings? It's just a simple, if it's local listings, it's across. Now there's going to be some major issues because, for example, we've got Hobart with a lot of local listings compared to some other councils which have no local listings or very few local listings. The theory behind it then is that at least it gets everyone on the same footing, and different municipalities could actually lobby to actually get local listings in there, and you're no longer dealing with different provisions when you're dealing with local listed heritage provisions in the various different municipalities, as opposed to this. Put opinion aside on that at the moment. The new scheme picks up quite a few things, but also it does exempt, I'm sure Brendan mentioned this morning, it does exempt quite a few things as well. It will also depend on how councils have transitioned. Now, some councils have taken it on board to incorporate within the list of local heritage the state listings as well, but there's a requirement and sets out how they've got to do that, so other councils don't have the resources to do that as well. What I wanted to show this for is that to a certain extent on a heritage grounds you're actually looking at more issues, and I think in some ways the provisions in the new code is actually better than the current interim scheme when you're dealing with the heritage wording. It's actually picking up more, it's actually got more structured better. However, there's possibly a question remains is actually how do you actually get to this in the first place? So I do appreciate that. because there may be some more exemptions as well. Application, once again, I really don't expect everyone to expect it, but I wanted to highlight the very beginning of it. And this is whenever I'm mentoring or teaching junior planners, I heavily emphasise don't just go straight to the ordinance. Don't go straight to the clauses, go straight to the application of the code. You can spend your time going around in circles over a provision to say we don't meet this or you do meet this, but the code might not even apply in the first place. Okay? And it's very, very easy to actually get pulled into a vortex of bureaucracy without actually ruling it out or in at the very beginning, because you actually haven't read how the application of the code applies. And I haven't because it is too much, but then the next part of this is the specific definitions and interpretations for the Heritage Code. And I think that, personally, from my own personal experience, ends up being quite important. It's not jumping to fences or the roof doesn't apply or the roof is the wrong something in that sense of the provisions when the code didn't even apply in the first place. It's something really key is to actually understand what the local heritage place is defined as and the heritage precinct is defined as, and how the code actually applies, and then the purpose of it. But if any of you can actually read that, because I'll struggle as well myself, this code does not apply to Aboriginal heritage sites. I will mark you on this, sorry. This is, once again, I've put this for the reason of its bulk. Okay, this is what the requirements for a representation is to the new planning schemes. So when you're submitting for, in accordance with the new planning schemes, can't just submit, and I'll deviate from heritage here for a little bit, but we can't just submit on something to say we want to have expanded residential here, or we don't like it because we think there's too much traffic in here, or can't just do it on a strategic idea. What I mean is, if that's actually a strategic requirement that should be assessed against the regional land use strategies, what this is actually telling us is that when we're submitting for a valid application, it has to be basically down to number 3, a provision of the draft land use, or legal gobbledygook, to be honest. So what does it actually mean? We can comment on a representation on parts of the LPS that contradicts or does not work within the SPS. For example, wording of a specific area, or for a heritage case it might be the heritage precinct wording might not actually make sense in relation to the zoning. So you might be a residential zone, but then it's actually saying can't do residential use. Okay, I'm being really flippant in that sense. Mapping of an overlay or a zone has been inappropriately applied to an area of land. For our case, a heritage precinct, we believe, you might believe it should actually extend 5 houses up or 5 houses back. It shouldn't actually incorporate that. It should include, the street across the road, a block or something as well. In that sense, mapping is an issue. For some of the rural councils, it also includes, I know there's been some big issues on the agriculture and the significant agricultural zone and how that's being mapped. So that's some of the major issues there. Or the third one is, going back to the third point, was that councils actually deviated from what they're meant to be doing under another section of the Act. So you can highlight to say, well, sorry, but you've incorporated something that you shouldn't have actually incorporated, or you've done a strategic analysis here that you shouldn't have actually done. I don't think you'll have many issues on that third point. It'll be more the first 2 points. Deviating from that would possibly question whether your representation is going to be valid. Let's show you, for example, the map on Sorrel, and this yellow area is heritage. There's a heritage place. The circle. There's another one here, another one spaced there, Fitzroy Street. if we had an issue on that, and what we'd be looking at would be questioning, well, I'm talking hypothetically here completely, but this should be expanded here, or this precinct here should actually incorporate Bennett Street and Henry Street, for example, or we'd have to give some justification for that and actually show why, but that's what the case would be. Or no, there's actually no heritage values at all for that site because of A, B and C reasons. That would require a planning scheme amendment. So yes, if they've gone through a planning scheme. Yes and no. The no component is by saying that the interpretation of the guidelines hasn't been done appropriately in the first place. Okay? But then yes, because it's a new scheme. And this is where a lot of council planners have actually had to struggle, because as much as they've been directed, it's just a transition from A to B. Wording's changed, as you would have seen. We go back to the comparison here. Provisions change completely, and this is just one component. So the use classes have changed. So in various different zonings, we've got different zone wordings. So in some areas, some zones don't allow certain overlays. Hence, some councils and planners have actually been going insane trying to transition something that actually doesn't transition. For example, environmental living. The environmental living zone is no longer there. So how do you actually transition to the zones that they're actually referring to now? Okay, and you're actually, the guidelines are saying directing to. So that's what's been some of the hold up from the planning's perspective. So when you're putting in your submission, what the Act is sort of asking for in the legal jargon is, has council planners transitioned it correctly? And are they doing, have they missed something, or have they gone too hard on something? That's essentially what they've asked for. So if you get successful in expanding it, what you're successful in doing is actually saying the guidelines should have been applied here. So yes, you've expanded the scheme, but no, the guidelines required it in the first place.